And so I did a thing with Rauschenberg down in Washington. He was doing theater pieces, and he was reviled by European critics. He won the Venice Biennale, which was a big event for American art. Before the American art wasn't taken seriously, and then there was a big hostile reaction to this American coming into the Biennale in Italy and walking away with a major prize. So I was living in Europe at that time, and people would ask me how I felt about that. I was interviewed to see if I agreed with this preposterous change of location for modern art. It happened anyhow, and it did. And I jumped the ship, came back to New York to take part in it, such as I could. Anyhow, that's a longer answer than you wanted.
And we didn't even touch upon what then brought you to start making films.
And what about making films?
And what brought you to start making the films then? To working with film?
Did I start? How early are these films? I started in about 1950. I was still in Europe. It's just the evolution. I was doing abstract geometric painting, and I would do one a week, and it would be the final painting. Everything would fall in the exact right place, and everything was exactly perfectly composed. And then I would start another one, and I was doing, every week I was doing a final painting, and it seemed strange to me in a way that the process itself would be more interesting than the final project. And so that I made some sketches about the process, and then I quite naturally flipped a few of these images, and that's how I guess it led me into filmmaking. And then I ended up making a film. I made some conventional kind of semi-abstract cartoon films. You might have seen tonight. I can't remember now what. However, the idea of narrative seemed strange to me because as a painter I wasn't dealing with narrative, it was storyline. And making animated films, the ones I saw always seemed to have a story of some kind. Anyhow, I became aware of earlier abstract filmmakers. Hans Richter was very important for me, making his abstract geometric film in 1920. And the other people...
Oscar Fischinger?
Huh?
Oscar Fischinger?
Yeah, Fischinger later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyhow, so I discovered there was this movement in filmmaking that wasn't anecdotal and stuff. That was equivalent to painting. So.
And one thing you've mentioned a couple of times was about your process of making recreation.
Yeah.
And then it was something you tried to do again, and you threw it away and it failed. And I
want
you to talk about the difference between the two.
That's a caution to all of you out there if you're artists. What I did with recreation, we saw it.
Yes.
That was that collision of stuff. Actually, it was a silent film, but my friend Noel Birch offered to make that soundtrack, and then he withdrew it. So it was shown for a while, silent film. I had some problems of thinking about sound. Anyhow, yeah, the question of, I was very excited by that film. The original form was a loop of film. I spliced two ends together, and then I could run it constantly and look at it. And I realized that there was an evolution. Every time I saw it, I would pick up another image. These are fast-moving images, and of course, something like a hand you'd recognize the first time around, and that would set up one rhythm with all the other images. But then as I looked at it longer, there are other things I could perceive. And so I got very excited with this idea of the saturation of an image and its general recognizability, if that's a word. That things that are familiar you could see 1/24 of a second, but if it was a word of a language you didn't understand, you'd have to hold it up there longer to see it. So anyhow, this opened up a beautiful can of worms in terms of perception. Anyhow, I was very excited by that film, and it did get some attention in Paris. It was shown and written about and considered outrageous, I guess. Nobody had seen anything like this, and I hadn't either. And so with that excitement, I wanted to do a sequel. And I think this is what I mentioned the other time, and a warning to everybody. You probably already know this, and I didn't. So I made a sequel, and it was dead. Somehow it didn't. It didn't. What? It didn't live up to the original, and so it was a great caution to me. And after that, every film I made, I first would digest something that I'd done and wait until that died down before I'd make a next one. And then I'd make an effort to do something entirely different, so I could interest myself in what I was doing. And experiment, I guess, is that dangerous word, but that's what so I consistently, the rest of my filmmaking lifetime, tried to do something entirely different after the previous thing. And little by little, I've noticed that they started to resemble each other, and that I couldn't keep up this kind of, but it was a worthy attempt anyhow. And that's all. I mean, that might not suit certain temperaments of people who discover something and then refine it and continue their whole lives doing one thing, and that's okay. I mean, in my case, I was trying to get myself just as excited each time with something different.
And then I wanted to see if we could show again how you make your films. When did you start using the 4x6 cards for your production means?
Yeah, I don't know if some of you are animation filmmakers. You know, the format is 8 by whatever it is, a normal sheet of paper with holes punched in it that goes down over some pegs to keep them registered. And I started out working somewhat that way with larger images, and I don't know how I discovered the idea of using smaller images and on stiffer paper that I could then hold in my hand and riffle to see the animation itself, and that just became much more efficient. And I could slide one of those cards into a block instead of putting them down over pegs. And anyhow, these days I suppose that seems very simplistic and not particularly exciting, but anyhow, so I have thousands of these 4x6 anime cards now.
I think the tactile quality of those cards is far more exciting than computer-generated imagery.
Well, there is something to say for the touch holding something that's an object and then having it, you know, that goes way back to pre-cinema, the flip books. And I made a lot of those, and that's what my films evolve as.